The warm embrace of family. Living with loved ones. Living with family in old age is often seen as a natural choice, especially in cultures that value multi-generational households. It promises warmth, care, and connection. Yet, sharing a home across generations also brings challenges that test patience and understanding. As the Buddha taught, to live in harmony, one must first understand the causes of discord. The two kitchens, Mrs. and had always dreamed of living out her golden years surrounded by her children and grandchildren. When her son, Hugh, and his wife invited her to live with them, she accepted eagerly, imagining evenings filled with laughter and shared meals. At first, her presence brought a comforting rhythm to the household. She cooked traditional dishes, told her grandchildren bedtime stories, and kept the house filled with the aromas of her youth. But as months passed, tensions began to simmer, and insisted on traditional ways of doing things, using herbal remedies for minor illnesses and cooking elaborate meals every evening. Hugh's wife, Mal, who worked full-time, preferred efficiency over tradition. A subtle battle began to brew in the kitchen, where Anne's slow, methodical ways clashed with Maui's quick, modern approach. One evening, after a disagreement over how to prepare a meal, Anne retreated to her room, feeling hurt and out of place. That night, she remembered a Buddhist story she had heard long ago about a potter and a farmer who quarreled over their shared well. The lesson was clear. Attachment to my way creates walls, while compromise builds bridges. The next morning, Anne spoke to May with an open heart. We're different, but we both want this family to thrive. Let's make it easier for each other. They decided to set up two small kitchens, one for Anne's traditional cooking and one for May's quick meals. With this simple adjustment, peace returned to the household. Mrs. N's story teaches that living with family in old age requires flexibility and mutual respect. The Buddhist principle of non-attachment reminds us to let go of rigid expectations and meet others with compassion. Family life flourishes when love is greater than the desire to be right. 2. The path of solitude. Living independently. For some, living independently in old age is not a rejection of family, but an embrace of autonomy. It allows elders to maintain their routines, explore their interests, and live without feeling like a burden. As the Buddha said, each being must find their own path, yet no one walks alone. Story: The House by the River. Mr. San, a retired fisherman, chose to live alone in a modest house by the river after his children moved to the city. Come stay with us, they urged, worried about his safety and loneliness. But Than smiled and said, the river has been my companion for decades. It's where I belong. Every morning, Than meditated by the water, the rhythmic flow reminding him of life's impermanence. He spent his days fishing, mending nets, and tending to his small vegetable garden. While his children called often and visited when they could, Than relished the quietude of his solitary life. One evening, a young villager named Bio came to seek Than's advice. I'm torn, Bio admitted. Should I follow my family's wishes or pursue my dream of becoming a carpenter? Than led Bio to the riverbank and handed him a stone. Throw it in the water, he said. As Bio did, ripples spread across the surface. See how the stone creates ripples without disturbing the river's flow. Your life is the stone. The river is your family's love. You can make your choices, and their love will remain. Bayo left feeling lighter, and Than felt a quiet pride in knowing he still contributed to the community in meaningful ways. His independence had given him not just freedom but clarity, allowing him to support his family and others without losing himself. Mr. Than's life embodies the Buddhist teaching of anicca impermanence. Living independently in old age is a way of honoring the self while recognizing that love does not diminish with distance. True freedom comes from embracing both solitude and connection without clinging to either. Reflection: balancing togetherness and solitude. The first two parts of this journey explore the contrasting paths of living with family and living independently. Each has its joys and challenges, but both require the wisdom to adapt, the courage to let go of attachments, and the compassion to nurture relationships. Whether shared under one roof or across distances, the essence of these choices lies in understanding and love. 3. A new community. The option of retirement homes. For some, moving into a retirement home represents not loss, but a new beginning. Buddhist teachings emphasize the importance of connection not just to family, but to a larger community. Retirement homes offer elders the opportunity to find companionship and purpose while freeing their children from feelings of guilt or obligation. Story: Mrs. Ho's circle of friends. Mrs. Hoa had always been a spirited woman, full of energy and laughter. When her husband passed away, she lived with her youngest son's family. While they cared for her lovingly, she noticed their increasing strain as their lives grew busier. One day, her granddaughter accidentally blurted, "Grandma, why do you have to live with us? We never have time to play with you anymore." The comment stung, but it also brought clarity. Mrs. Hoa realized she wanted more than just being present in someone else's busy home. She wanted a life filled with companionship and joy. With her family's support, she decided to move into a retirement community. At first, her children were apprehensive, fearing she might feel abandoned. But when they visited her weeks later, they found her leading a gardening club and participating in yoga classes. Her days were filled with laughter, conversations, and new friendships. "When you cling to one branch," she told her daughter during a visit, "you may never see the beauty of the whole tree." Here, I found not just care, but a forest of connections. Mrs. Ho even began hosting meditation circles, introducing Buddhist teachings on compassion and gratitude to her fellow residents. She found that living in a community where everyone faced similar stages of life created an atmosphere of mutual understanding and support. Mrs. Ho's story illustrates that moving to a retirement home is not about abandonment, but about embracing a new kind of interdependence. The Buddhist principle of metta-loving kindness teaches us that care and connection can be cultivated beyond familial ties. In old age, a supportive community can be a source of joy and renewal. 4. The challenge of generational differences. Living arrangements across generations often bring both comfort and conflict. The Buddha taught that misunderstanding arises when we fail to see things from another's perspective. Old age offers the opportunity to practice empathy, patience, and compromise, transforming potential discord into harmony. Story: The divided table. Mr. Thieu, a retired carpenter, moved in with his eldest daughter, Lin, and her family after his wife passed away. Lin welcomed him warmly, grateful to have her father close. At first, the arrangement brought a sense of completeness, meals shared together, stories told late into the night. But as the months passed, small disagreements began to surface. Mr. Fuse was accustomed to quiet meals, savoring every bite mindfully, while Lin's family often ate quickly, juggling conversations about school and work. He felt hurt, interpreting their hurried meals as a lack of respect. Meanwhile, Lin felt her father was too critical of their modern lifestyle. One evening, after an especially tense dinner, Lin's teenage son said, "Grandpa, why don't you like how we live?" The words lingered, heavy with misunderstanding. The next day, Lin and her father sat together over tea. "Dad," she began gently, "we live differently, but it doesn't mean we love you any less. Can we find a way to meet in the middle?" Inspired by her openness, Mr. Fuck shared a Buddhist teaching he cherished. Harmony arises when we let go of our need to control and instead seek to understand. They decided to make small changes, setting one evening a week for a traditional family meal and allowing other nights to follow the family's faster pace. The story of Mr. Fuse and Lin reminds us of the Buddhist principle of right understanding. Bridging generational gaps requires seeing beyond our own preferences to appreciate others' perspectives. Living in harmony is not about erasing differences but embracing them with compassion and flexibility. 5. The shared journey supporting each other in old age. Buddhist teachings emphasize interbeing, the interconnectedness of all lives. In old age, this principle becomes even more profound. Whether living with family, friends, or neighbors, mutual support transforms life into a shared journey. It is not about dependency, but about finding strength and togetherness. Story: The neighbor's net. Mrs. Fine lived in a small village on the outskirts of Hanoi. Her home was modest, her days simple, but her heart was vast. At 65, her children had moved to the city, and though they visited often, she spent most of her time alone. One rainy afternoon, her neighbor, Mr. Dung knocked on her door. In his hands was a torn fishing net. "Mrs. Bin," he said, "I've tried to fix this, but my eyesight isn't what it used to be. Could you help?" Bin welcomed him in, spreading the net across her table. Together, they worked for hours, their laughter mingling with the sound of the rain. As they finished, Dung said, "You have such steady hands, like the river itself." From that day, the two neighbors began to share their days. Bin helped Dung with his nets and gardening while Dung repaired her roof and carried heavy loads. They started a small community garden, inviting others in the village to join. Soon, what began as a simple act of mending grew into a network of shared care. One evening, Bin reflected, "We are like this net. Each thread is fragile, but together we are strong enough to hold the weight of the world." The story of Mrs. Bin and Mr. Dung exemplifies the Buddhist teaching of dependent origination, that all beings rely on each other. In old age, supporting and being supported creates a life of purpose and connection. True wealth lies in the bonds we weave with others. 6. The ultimate answer, finding peace within. The question, who should you live with in old age, often points outward to family, friends, or communities. Yet, Buddhist philosophy teaches that peace is found not in external arrangements but within the mind and heart. Living mindfully, whether alone or with others, is the key to a contented old age. Story: The Empty Bench. Mr. Nam, an 80-year-old retired teacher, lived in a small house by the sea. His wife had passed away, and his children lived abroad. Many in the village wondered how he could seem so serene, spending his days walking along the shore and sitting on a bench overlooking the waves. One curious young man finally asked him, "Don't you feel lonely, sitting here by yourself?" Nam smiled gently and replied, "Loneliness doesn't come from being alone. It comes from not knowing how to be with yourself. This bench isn't empty. It is full of the lessons the ocean teaches me every day." The young man frowned, not understanding. Nam continued, "The waves rise and fall, but the ocean remains. Just as our emotions come and go, the peaceful mind remains steady. If you can sit with yourself, you can find peace anywhere." Nam practiced mindfulness daily, letting go of regrets about the past and worries about the future. His home was not defined by walls, but by the vast space of his awareness. He maintained a close bond with his children, even from afar, writing letters filled with wisdom and love. Mr. Nam's story reflects the Buddhist teaching of anatta, the non-self. True peace comes not from where or with whom we live, but from living mindfully and embracing impermanence. In old age, cultivating inner peace allows us to find joy in every moment, no matter the circumstances.